All right, let's start off by saying Barakat Yahawah, Bahashem Yahawah Shai, Bahashem Racha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is a slight response to tracing the name Yahawah. And this is an old video that Elder Yahawah had reloaded to his page. I thought it was a newer video because it seemed like stuff that we teach, which we've always been teaching about the name anyway. But what he did was, beautiful job at tracing the name of the Most High from the beginning, pretty much all the way up until now. I mean, it wasn't an exhaustive, but it was very good because it went through the history, the major history, going back to when the name of the Most High first starts off, or when it's first mentioned in the Bible, which most people don't know that. Through, the chosen line, all the way down through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all the way to modern time. So I wanted to do like a slight response to it, but the direction I want to go into it through the Spirit is pretty much just deal specifically with the line of Shem. And there was another point that to bring up, if the Spirit allows, for me to remember, go through it, and Lord's will, if Yahawah Bashem Shai through the Spirit allows for me to go through what was going through my mind when I was watching this video, then we'll go through it. If not, whatever direction the Lord wants me to go in, that's what we're gonna do. All right, so as we mentioned already, the name of the Most High Yahawah doesn't appear until the book of Genesis, the second chapter. Then, from that point on, you have Adam and Eve, which man was created in the fifth year, or the fifth day, should I say, or the 5,000th year of the creation, which most people don't know that either. I got this Bible trivia app, and pretty much a lot of the questions, well, not a lot, some of the questions are based off of plantation Christianity. Some of them are based off of, the modern way of thinking, like they'll say, what day was man created? We know it's the fifth day, but if you put fifth, it'll mark it wrong. So you have to put the sixth day. So, there's, the app is not super accurate, but it does. It's good to kind of go through it, just to freshen up on certain things. But man was created on the fifth day, with the whales and the fish of the sea and the birds and of the air and everything of that nature. We could read about that in the book of Second Ezra. I believe it's Second Ezra, the 6th chapter, where it goes into it, and it tells you that on the fifth day, or upon the fifth day, man was created. And also the great whales that it speaks about in scriptures. The Hebrew word, I believe, is thanayim, if I'm not mistaken, which are sea creatures, pretty much, like Leviathan and the such, or the sea serpent, Leviathan. And then we move into the second chapter of Genesis, which is, the Most High establishing Adam, with the laws, statutes, and commandments, breathing into his nostrils the breath of life, making man a living soul, establishing, the establishment of the union between man and woman was already established in the first chapter, where it says, let them be fruitful and multiply. But he found a helpmeet for Adam, in the second chapter, which is Eve. Yahawah, which means living. You got the word, which is Yahawah, which is Eve, which means living. Goes back to the root word, if I'm not mistaken, Chaya, which Chaya is life or living, which the small hats wear a pendant around their neck that says L'chaim, which means to life. And that's where the word or the name goes back to. Then, as we go through the third chapter, in the second chapter, Adam names the animals and everything that we see. So the names that everything is being called today was set up by the Most High Son, Adam, which was Yahawah back then, and he established all of that, what we know today. Then in the third chapter was where the transgression came in. Excuse me, where the serpent, which was an actual man, deceived Eve into partaking of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which the Heavenly Father said not to do. So that was the deception and the great fall and the curses being put upon, the earth, man, woman, the serpent, which was an actual man, so on and so forth. And then when we get through that, the tree of life was pretty much, there was a stop put to it. Just like today, when you have these Israelites that can't understand the truth, there's an actual angel there that's not allowing them to receive it, because they're blocking the way to the tree of life. Because if they get to the tree of life and have the understanding and the ability to hear it and understand it and receive it and believe it, then they would be saved. So that's what happened back then. So we're moving on into the fourth chapter, which was Adam and Eve having children, Cain and Abel. And then within the fourth chapter, when Cain killed his brother Abel, what happened was the Lord cursed the earth. The Lord cursed even further. The Lord cursed Cain by giving him leprosy. And as we read further down, he was driven out and he wandered into the land of Nod, which was not an actual land. When you go to the word Nod itself, the word there is Nawad, which means wanderer. So he wandered off into, further east. And the name Cain, Kwayan, means weapon, but like a stabbing or a thrusting weapon, which is what he did to his brother to kill him. And later on, he will come back as Esau and will receive the blessing from Isaac, which is Adam, which is Yahawah, and he received the blessing of the sword. Now Abel, the name Abel goes back to the Hebrew word Habal, which the Hebrew word Habal means transitory, meaning here for a minute and then gone, just like transit. Whether it's subway, whether it's or trains, or whether it's buses, even taxis are transitory. They're there for a moment, pick up the cargo and move on. And that's what Abel was set up as, was transitory. He was there for a moment and he moved on. A term that Elder Apostle Gabar I first heard bring out, called nomen omen, which means name prediction. All right, and as we move down further into the fourth chapter, Cain started taking wives unto himself. Right? So the question is, if there was only Adam and Eve at the beginning, where did these women come from? And when we read into the next chapter, it tells us that, that the Lord created man and male and female, and called their name Adam, because you had the Adamites, which was a group of people on the planet back then that were all created on the 5th day or the 5,000th year of creation. Right? And as we move down into the fourth chapter, it gives you the descendants of Cain, his sons and their sons and their sons, so on and so forth. And that right there, those are the sons of the wicked, the seed of Cain, which were the sons of the wicked. It even tells you that in the book of 1 John, the 3rd chapter, not of Cain, who was of that wicked one, or something along those lines. And pretty much that established the seed of the wicked. Now you had the seed of men already in the earth, but that'll come later. even though they were all created at the same time, because in Second Ezra 6th chapter, it tells us that everything was created, and it tells us that the Lord has his chosen people that were separate from these other nations, and they received blessings and kingdoms and all of that, and we still haven't gotten ours, so to speak. So those are the sons of the wicked at the end of chapter 4. And then when we get into the 5th chapter, it speaks about, also one of the Cain's descendants was called Tubal-Cain. Tubal-Cain, I believe it's Thawabal Kwayan. The word Tubal means traveler, and Cain is weapon. So traveling weapon, which fits Esau today, even though the seed of the wicked was destroyed during the flood, but they came back through someone called Esau, which the term Esau wasted away his heat. And you have today what's known as mercenaries, and these mercenaries are pretty much hired guns, and they go anywhere on the planet, to establish whatever needs to be established by whatever ruler needs to be established for money, for hire. All right, so as we proceed on into the 5th chapter of Genesis, this is where, because towards the end of the 4th chapter is when, the Lord gave Adam another seed, which was Seth. And then after him was Enos, and when Enos was established, it said, then began man to call upon the name of the Lord, all capital letters, which the word there is Yahawah. So men were calling on that name way from the beginning, but it just wasn't as famous as Alashajah, God Almighty, which Alashajah, Allah is God and Shajah is demon-like power or terrible one. Alashajah, demon-like power or terrible one. So then we proceed into the 5th chapter, and the 5th chapter goes into the lineage of the son, or the sons of God, or the sons of the righteous, which later on after the flood would come back to be known as the Israelites. All from Adam's seed, 2 sons, Cain and Abel. Abel was destroyed. Then came Seth in his stead, which we believe through the Spirit that Seth is Abel coming back again in the reincarnation back to the earth. And that's where the seed of the righteous was established. So when you read Genesis 4 towards the end, it gives you the lineage of the wicked. And then when you get into the 5th chapter, it gives you the whole lineage of the righteous. From Adam all the way down, all the way down to Noah, and the 5th chapter, like I said, that's all the sons of the power, the sons of God, or the son, or today in today's term, Israel, which the term Israel goes back to the Hebrew word Yasha'Allah. Yah is he, Shah is prince, and Allah is power or God. He is a prince of the power, or he is a prince with God, because we are the heirs. We are the inheritance of the Heavenly Father, Yahawah. And when we get down to the end of the 5th chapter and go into the 6th chapter of Genesis, this is where the scriptures first start speaking directly about the sons of men, which are the other nations. But when you go to the 3rd chapter, symbolically, the sons of men were already spoken of in the form of trees. When Adam went to go hide himself in the midst of the trees or something along those lines, which were the other nations, and they took on their customs, their traditions. They started dressing like the nations because they tried to hide among those nations. But the spirit that was in Adam and Eve was totally different from the other nations. So although they took on those customs, they stood out from the other nations. Just like today, you have Israel that's scattered among all the nations, and you have some of them even look like these nations, but you see a distinction. You see a special type of spirit in these individuals that look like those people, but they don't act like those people. They have a different vibe about them, a different spirit. They can dance, they do amazing things. They have great talent. And when you look at these other nations, the other nations are dismal. They're dead. They're Moabites. They walk with a bounce. They're funny style. But with Israel, even though they look like those funny style people, there's a different spirit, a different aura about them. So that's what happened in the garden. They tried to hide, but they couldn't, because Jake is going to stand out from all the other nations because of the spirit, or that peculiar spirit, or that Holy Spirit that the Lord gave to us. And that's why you could tell a difference, if you have spiritual eyes to see. If you're not stuck in that carnal mindset of looking at these people for what they look like, instead of looking at them for what they do, because the Spirit beareth witness with our spirit. Now, I know I'm not bringing out any precepts, but I'm speaking scripturally, for a reason, So going back, the sons of men are first mentioned physically, which are the other nations in Genesis the 6th chapter, but they are mentioned indirectly along with the sons of the wicked in the 3rd chapter, but symbolically. So when we read the 6th chapter, the sons of the Most High, which came out of the line of Adam, they were mingling themselves with the women of the other nations, which at that time the Lord didn't want that. Now, once Israel was established as a people, there are laws within the Bible of how to deal and how to get concubines. If you see a woman that's fine as hell, you get with her. But there was a certain way that you had to go about it. And the thing about it is, with Jake, even today, when they get with these women of the other nations, Jake falls in love with them. And what happens? They start to follow their customs. If the woman is into Buddhism, they get into Buddhism. If the woman is into Hinduism, they get into Hinduism. If the woman is a Roman Catholic, they get into Roman Catholicism. If the woman is whatever she is, they get into it, which is supposed to be the other way around. The woman is supposed to get into what the man gets into, because the vibration of the man comes upon the woman. Because that's the way the Lord set up the structure. All right, so once we read further down, wickedness started to prevail in the earth, and what happened was the Lord destroyed the earth back then by the flood. But before he did that, he chose Noah, and Noah's name in the Hebrew is Noach, which means comforter or comfort, because through Noah's seed the earth was going to be comforted, because the line was still going to continue. The Lord didn't destroy. He destroyed every living thing except for Noah, his sons, and their wives, which was 8 souls that survived. Then when they came out of that whole, you have to remember, like, we're speaking about it now, like, yeah, there was a flood, and this, that happened, and the Lord told Noah to build you an ark from gopher wood and make rooms in it, and do this and do that, the other, take your the beast, the unclean beast by 2, bring him in there, set him up. You take the clean beast by 7, bring him in there, set him up. And then all of a sudden one day when Noah finished building the ark, the Lord closed the door and it just started raining. But you have to understand the horror that was going on at that time. The sheer horror of that. And the people, think of it as the people. Because why did the scripture say that the Lord closed the door of the ark? Because Noah would have had compassion and opened it, and everybody would have died, and everything would have died. So the Lord sealed the door. So when they tried to come in, they couldn't do it. So you can imagine the screams and the yells and the blood curdling, yelling that was going on back then, yelping. While these 8 people were inside of the ark, being delivered. And before the Lord brought the flood, he made sure that Noah had sons. He had 3 sons. One named Shem, one named Ham, one named Japheth. All right? So those are the 3 sons. So out of those 3 sons, the whole earth will be repopulated again. And that was the purpose for that. All right? So, moving on, eventually the flood disappeared. It went back, and the ark landed on the mountains of Ararat. All right. And from that point on, men started, after they came out of the ark and they built their tents, did what they had to do. Noah built them a vineyard, and he got drunk, because you got to remember that was a hell of an ordeal he just went through. So he got drunk. He was happy the Lord delivered him. It doesn't say it like this, but if you extrapolate, another word the elder apostle Gabar goes into a lot, that's what he was stressed. So he built them, and he drank the wine. He was feeling good. He was chilling, butt naked, in his tent, so on and so forth. The story, how Ham made fun of him, and Shem and Japheth went in backwards with a covering and covered their father. And Noah woke up from his wine, and he knew what his younger son, or his son Noah had done, because he was a prophet. So moving on, you go into the 9th chapter, you go into the 10th chapter. The 10th chapter is what the so-called scholars call the Table of Nations. And the Table of Nations is pretty much all of the ancient names of all of the people that you see on the face of the earth today. They go back to either Shem, Ham, or Japheth, and one of their descendants. So everybody on the earth, no matter who they are, where they are, no matter what their story is or what bullshit they've been taught, or whatever, story of origin that they have, everybody on the planet Earth, no matter who they are, what they look like, how light or how dark they are, they all go back to Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Because at that point, that's when the earth was repopulated. Now, when you deal with the three sons of Noah, you had Japheth, which is the first on the list as far as, the listing of the nations. He had sons, and they had sons. They were descendants. The name Japheth, Yapath, means to enlarge, and you could see that in the large portion of land or lands that the Most High gave them, because that was their land. And the original Japhites were dark-skinned people. They were brown-skinned people that wore long hair. The men and the women both wore long hair. And this is the reason why when they're depicted in art, especially the Minoans, which was one of the descendants of the Japhites, they were depicted, the men being brown-skinned, which they were all brown-skinned, the men and the women, but the women would be distinguished from the men because they all had long hair. The men didn't have no beards. The women would be painted white, not because they were so-called white women, but because that was the form of art that the Minoans would set up to distinguish between men and women. So that was Japheth, his descendants. They all were all given the land of Europe. They covered all those lands of Europe, and then they covered the islands within the Mediterranean Sea, because the scriptures speak about, the Mediterranean Sea. Or it speaks about, that by this were the isles of the Gentiles fulfilled. Let me get that real quick, because I can't think of the actual quote. And like I said, I'm speaking scripturally. I'm not really going to the scriptures. I'm speaking scripturally through the Spirit as best as I can, and from time to time the Spirit, if I can't think of something, then boom, we'll go to the precept and bring it out. This is Genesis 10:1. Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah. Generations, in this case, is a representation of the seed line, or the genealogy, which is the seed of, or the genealogy of these men, of these boys, which actually were men, are the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And unto them were sons born after the flood. Right. And consequently, when Ham did what he did, the Lord didn't curse Ham. He cursed his son Canaan, which was his firstborn. And there was a reason why the Lord did that, because in Canaan, eventually, the Lord would give them the land that the nation of Israel would inherit. So they were cursed. So it was already justified for us to get those lands. All right. It says the sons of Japheth, Gomer and Magog and Madai and Javan and Tubal and Meshach and Tyrus. Now, here it is. This Japheth, one of his sons' name was what? Tubal. But then you have Cain. One of his sons' name was what? Tubal Cain. Two different people, two different lineages. You see? But they just happen to have the same name. Just like when you read in Genesis the 4th chapter and Genesis the 5th chapter, you have sons of Cain and their descendants that are named similar or same names as the sons of the power in the list of the sons of God in Genesis the 5th chapter. That doesn't make them of that line, of that people, you know, because certain names were common back then. Remember, everybody was speaking Hebrew, the same language. It says, and the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz and Riphath and Togarmah, and the sons of Javan, Elisha and Tarshish, Kittim and Dodanim. Now in the 5th verse it says, by these, meaning the Japhites, were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands. Right? Were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue, and their families and their nations. You know, and I had this one individual talking about that the only people that are labeled as Gentiles are Japhet, because it says here, you know, by these were the isles of the Gentiles. And I said, but wait a minute. You know, the Spirit tapped me and said, but wait a minute. That word Gentiles just simply means nations. Goes back to the Hebrew word Gawayim for nations, plural. Gawaya for nation, singular. And he tried to argue back and forth. I said, well, in the same verse, you have the word nation or nations. And it's the same exact word for Gentile. And after that, he didn't come back anymore. You know? Because, you know, wacky-tacky Christians, once again, they cherry pick. But they don't have the full picture. Anyways, besides the point. So those are the descendants of Japheth. All right? And that's who governed or was in the lands of Europe and the Mediterranean Sea, those islands. Then, as the second one in line, dealing with the order of how it's written, is Ham. Ham had 4 sons. Ham had 4 sons: Mizraim, Put, Canaan, and Cush. I didn't say them in the proper order, but by those 4 sons, they had sons, and that's where the people of so-called Africa today, or the land of Ham, that's, you know, where they are. And their land extended from so-called Africa in through the Fertile Crescent up into Babylon and those areas there, because they were given all that land. But that main stretch from Egypt all the way to Babylon, you know, to the Euphrates River in that area, that was all eventually going to become the land of Israel, which goes back to Jacob, one of the sons of the promise. Go back to the word Yahawah, which means supplanter. Okay? Now, those 4 sons of Ham, that's, you know, where the Hamites came from, you know, the different tribes. And then the last on the list in the table of nations is Shem. Now, Shem had 5 sons. You know, he had Arphaxad, he had Aram, Ashur, Lud, and Elam. Those 5 sons. Now you have today, because Elder Yahawah mentioned this in his lesson, you have today a term called anti-Semitism. You know, which if you was to ask somebody what is a Semite or a Shemite, if they have done no studies, they're going to just say, well, you know, the little hats. And say, but wait a minute, where does the name go? Who was Sem or Shem? Who was that? You would have to go back to, if they know anything, they would have to go back to the 3 sons of Noah, which was Shem. Now, Shem had 5 sons. So if Shem had 5 sons, those 5 sons would be known as what? Shemites. Now, we know the little hats didn't come out of all 5 of them. They only came out of one of them, which was Arphaxad, all the way down the line. So if that's the case, when you show hatred towards any one of those sons and their descendants, that would mean that you would be an anti-Semite. Or really the real term is anti-Shemite or Shemitic. So why aren't they touching on that? And they're not going to be able to touch on that because the thought that was programmed into their mind was that an anti-Semite is somebody that's against the little hats. And it's far beyond that because you have many descendants of Shem all the way down the line. You know, so that's just something to consider. Now, as Elder Yahawah, the name Ham, Chum, means hot. All right. So we move on down to Shem. The name Shem comes from the Hebrew word Shum, which means name. Now, within the same chapter of Genesis 10, when it speaks about Shem, it brings out something heavy because it speaks about Shem, who had 5 sons, but it says that he was the father of Eber, which really technically he would be like either the grandfather or the great-grandfather of Eber. And that's a key word there, Eber. So let's read that real quick. Genesis 10:21. Unto Shem also, the brother of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth, the elder, even to him were children born. So now why did it say that he was a father of Eber, which he wasn't? He was a grandfather or great-grandfather of Eber. So why did he say that? Because through the line of Eber, that's where the line was going to continue. Now the word Eber goes back to the Hebrew word Ibar, which means from the past. This is where we get the name Hebrew from. Eber, Hebrew. And this word Hebrew was established way before Abraham left Ur of the Chaldees, because they try to say that Eber or Ibar means one that crosses across or something along those lines, which it can be used that way in certain applications in the scriptures, but the name itself doesn't go back to that. The name itself goes all the way back to one of the sons of Shem, which actually came through the line of Arphaxad, whose name was Eber, Ibar, okay, which means from the past. This is where the name of the language Hebrew comes from. Now, the reason why he was called Eber or Ibar was because through his line was the language and the name of the Lord, as Elder Yahawah pointed out, and the chosen line was going to come through. Out of all these Shemites, you had Arphaxad, right? Then you had the children of Shem, Elam, and Ashur, and Arphaxad, and Lud, and Aram. And the children of Aram, Uz, and Hul, and Gether, and Mash. And Arphaxad begot Selah. And Selah begot Eber. So actually, Arphaxad was the grandfather of Eber from the past. And the Lord established this, before the Tower of Babel, because that's when the separation of the nations happened. Even though there were 3 classifications of men back then, and there still is today: the sons of God, which are the Israelites today, the sons of men, which are the other nations, and the sons of the wicked. This is where a real separation was going to come as far as language and dialect was concerned, right? It says, and unto Eber were born 2 sons. The name of the one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. So Joktan, even though he was the son of Eber, he didn't play as an important role as his brother Peleg and Eber, his father. And the name Peleg goes back to the Hebrew word palag, which means to divide. Because once the division came, this is where the Lord was going to bring in the chosen line. When we go to, we already mentioned it, but let's go to it, 2nd Ezra 6 and 54, and then we're going to get another precept. It says, and after these things, Adam also, whom thou madest Lord of all thy creatures, of him come we all, and the people also whom thou hast chosen, because that is key. You, out of all the people on the planet Earth, the Lord only chose one seed. This is why he told Abraham, whose name was Abram back then, which the name Abram goes back to Abba Rum, which means father exalted. Abba, father, Rum, exalted. From the Lord promised him that in his seed, singular, the nations will be blessed. And that seed that the nations were going to be blessed in was going to receive the promised land, which was from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates, and that region, what the so-called scholars today call the Fertile Crescent. So the Lord didn't bless all nations through Abraham's seed because Abraham only had 8 sons. All nations did not come out of Abraham. So it is impossible for that for someone to say that in Abraham all nations were going to be blessed. It's impossible because all nations didn't come out of Abraham. The reason why it said that, because the chosen line of the seed of Abraham was going to be scattered throughout the 4 corners of the earth as a part of the curse, being mingled in among these nations, learning their ways, worshiping their gods, their culture, their philosophy, their language, and eventually they would be brought out of there by the words of the Heavenly Father that's doing the fishing. Okay? So it goes on to say, all this have I spoken before thee, O Lord, because thou madest the world for our sakes, because the Lord chose us. Right? As for the other people, meaning all the other nations that came out of Adam, right? Adam, he had his sons, the sons of God, the sons of the wicked through Cain, and all on down the road, the flood came, Noah came, Shem, Ham, and Japheth repopulated the earth. So out of all, from Noah all the way down, all of those are sons of Adam, whether they're Japhites, whether they're Hamites, or whether they're Shemites. It says, as for the other people which also come of Adam, thou hast said that they are nothing, because the Lord does not care about these other nations, even though he created them. But yet still in all, even though they're not the chosen, the Lord still takes care of them, still gives them food, still gives them land, still gives them agriculture, and every other aspect that's needed for everyday life for these nations, because these nations also have a purpose. They will become our slaves. And when the kingdom is established, we're going to teach them our ways, because they're going to be in subjection under us, tributaries. Just like today, we're tributary and subjected to these other nations, and all the way from the beginning when we started going into captivity under these nations, and a lot of these nations would force their ways upon us. If you don't do this, at the sound of the dulcimer and the viol and so on and so forth, if you don't bow down to this statue, you're going to be put to death. Today when you come up all the way up into modern times, going back to the late 1400s to the present, they forced their white supremacist plantation Christianity religion upon us. You see? So when the kingdom is established, they're going to have to learn our ways. They're going to have to be subjected unto us. They're going to have to learn how to please us. All right? It says, but be like unto spittle, because they are nothing. They're like unto spittle, which is spit, and has likened the abundance of them unto a drop that falleth from a vessel. So the whole multitude of the heathens, all different nations combined, are nothing more than a drop from a vessel, a drop from a bucket, nothing more than spittle. But they were created for our sakes. It says, and now, O Lord, behold, these heathen, which have ever been reputed as nothing, have begun to be lords over us and to devour us. Right, because we sinned against the Lord. But now the Lord is going to give us retribution, true reparations. And he's beginning the reparation and the repairing of us by this word. We're mentally being repaired first. Then physically we'll be repaired once the kingdom of heaven is established. But we, thy people, whom thou hast called thy firstborn, thy only begotten, and thy fervent lover, are given into their hands. Right, because they rule over us. If the world now be made for our sakes, why do we not possess an inheritance with the world? How long shall this endure? Because the kingdom that we're going to have, we're not going to share with anyone. See, now you have, even from the beginning, you had nations that ruled, and they would allow certain nations to rule under them as vassals, vassal states or vassal empires. You know, like you had the Middle Persian Empire, the Syro-Babylonian Empire, the Greco-Roman Empire. When the kingdom is established, these nations will not be ruling with us. After they serve their captivity, the Edomites will be done away with completely, and the other nations will get their land back. They'll have rule among themselves, but they'll still be tributary to us. Okay? So, with that being said, we go on down the line from Shem to our facts, and then we get into the 11th. Well, actually, before you get to the 11th chapter, the 10th chapter and the 24th verse, it says, and our facts that begot Salah, and Salah begot Eber, and unto Eber were two sons born. Were born two sons. The name of the one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. And Joktan begat Amodad, and Shelef, and Hazar, Maveth, and Jerah, so on and so forth. When you get to the 31st verse, these are the sons of Shem, after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their nations. All right? Because this is what they call the table of nations. So out of these three sons came a host of nations. These are the families of the sons of Noah, families, nations of the sons of Noah, after their generations, in their nations. And by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. So all peoples that you see on the planet Earth all derive from one of the three sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, or Japheth. All right? And that's it. And anyone that comes out of the line of Shem and his descendants are all considered Shemites. Like, for instance, Abraham will be considered a Shemitic Hebrew because he comes from the line of Shem through the direct line of Eber or Ibar. This is why when you go to the 14th chapter, matter of fact, let's get there real quick. Genesis 14:13, it says, and there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre. And, the Amorite, brother of Esco and brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abram, right? Because they helped Abram out because he went to go get his son Lot. His nephew Lot from these kings that took him. You know, Kedar, Laomer, and all the rest of them demons. But the point is that they called Abram the Hebrew. So he's a Shemitic Hebrew because he comes from the direct line of Shem. At that time, he would be considered the chosen line, or Faxad, Salah, Eber, Peleg, on down the line. You know, that's the Shemitic Hebrew line that the Lord is dealing with. And there's a reason why the Lord kept narrowing it down from three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, to one son, Shem, to a direct line from the five sons of Shem, which was our Faxad, on down the line till he got past Terah, which was Abraham's father, till he got to the three sons of Terah, Nahor, you had Abram, and you had Haran, right? But then it went to who? To Abraham. And then from Abraham had 8 seeds, and through those 8 seeds, only one was chosen, which was Isaac, right? And when we go to Genesis 25, right, this was when Isaac, or just before Isaac got with Rebekah and their 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. So Genesis 25 and 5, and Abraham, because his name was changed from Abram, father exalted, to Abraham, Abba, father, Raham, multitude, father of a multitude. Because really he had 8 sons and they had children. Even Ishmael himself had 12 sons, and they became a great nation. But the seed of the promise came through Isaac. You see? That's why the Apostle Paul said, I am a Hebrew of the Hebrews. Because there was just more than one set of Hebrews. So it says, verse 6, but it says, I'm sorry, verse 5. And Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac, because he was the heir of the promise. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. But unto the sons of the concubines, which were 7 other ones, beginning with Ishmael, which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts. And after he gave them gifts, what happened? And sent them away from Isaac, his son, while he yet lived eastward unto the east country. Why? Because he sent them away from them, because although they were all brothers, they were not the seed of the promise. So he gave them gifts, sent them away, and separated them from his son Isaac, as directed by the Heavenly Father. Because he knew that from Abraham, the seed or the chosen line would go to Isaac, because Isaac was the seed of the promise. We go to Romans, the 9th chapter, and we go to the, I'll start at 5. Whose are the fathers, and of whom concerning the flesh Yahawah came. For who? For the Israelites. Who is over all, right, because he is over all of us. He is the head. Yahawah is the head. The Most High blessed forever. Amen. Not as though the word of the Most High had taken none effect. For they are not all Israel, which are of Israel, because you have Israelites that are not a part of the chosen. And the chosen of the nation of Israel, which are known as the elect, are known as the first fruits. This is why in Genesis, the 20th chapter, it speaks about the first resurrection. I'm sorry, the first dominion. Or is it first dominion or first resurrection? Because there's 2 scriptures. One of them says dominion, the other one says resurrection, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just double check that. Resurrection, yep. The first, this is the Genesis, Revelation 20 and 5. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. That's dealing with the other nations. Now, this chapter jumps. So the next line goes with the 4th verse. It says, this is the first resurrection, which is what? The elect. You know, the first dominion, the ones that have the first dominion in the kingdom of heaven. The elect of the nation of Israel. Okay? So going back to Romans 8 and 6, they're not all Israel, which are of Israel, because not all Israelites are of the elect. It's the chosen nation, but there are chosen within the chosen, the Israel of the Most High. It says, neither because they are the seed of Abraham, because Abraham had 8 children. Are they all children? But in Isaac shall thy seed, singular, be called. And that's why Abraham gave gifts to the sons of the concubines and sent them away from Isaac, because they are not partakers of the promise. They are not the seed of the promise. They are seeds, but they are not the seed of the promise. There is a distinction. And this is why the wacky-tacky Christians try to do away with the Old Testament and bring in something called replacement theology or supersessionism to replace or erase the nation of Israel, to insert the so-called believers, which they say are all nations, because they know, the higher-ups know, that if Israel remains in the picture, their shit won't work. That's why they got to brush the Israelites out and superimpose themselves onto something that they are not a part of. They were never a part of, and they could never return to. They could not be reconciled, because they are not a part of this. They never were and never will be. When the kingdom of heaven is established, though, they will have to follow our ways. You see? So reading on, verse 8, that is, they which are the children of the flesh, because Abraham had 8 sons. You know, he popped 3 women, 2 of them were concubines, and he had 8 sons by all 3 of these women. It says, that is, they which are the children of the flesh. Just because you came out of the loins or the ball sack of Abraham, it says, that is, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God or the Most High, Yasha Allah, the sons of the power. But the children of the promise are counted for the seed. One seed. That's why it calls Isaac the seed of the promise. This is why, once again, Abraham gave gifts to the sons of the concubines and sent them away from Isaac his son, which was the inheritor, or the next in line of the inheritance. It says, for this is the word of promise. At this time will I come, and Sarah shall have a son. And not only this, but when Rebekah also had conceived by one, even by our father Isaac, for the children being not yet born, neither having done any good or evil, that the purpose of the Most High according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth. Right? Because the two sons that were born to Isaac, Jacob and Esau, they didn't do anything good or bad to be one to be chosen and one not to be chosen. One to be the seed of the promise and the other one not to be the seed of the promise. It wasn't anything that they did wrong. It was a purpose of election that the Most High brought forth. And this is why, the Lord did it that way. Because it wasn't about any works. It was what the Most High chose. And the scripture said that the counsel of the Lord, that shall stand. It says, it was said unto her, the elder shall serve the younger, which they did, and they will, which the elder was Esau. As it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. And that has never changed. And this is a direct quote going back to the Old Testament, to the book of Malachi, the 1st chapter. And then when we read Isaiah, the 34th chapter, the Lord has indignation against this people, the Edomites, against all of them. Not just the man Esau, because back a while ago, you had these wacky-tacky Christians trying to say, well, look, no, that's just talking about the man Esau. No, you err not knowing the scriptures. It speaks about Esau, whose name was changed to Edom. The word Esau, Ishah or Ishashua, means wasted away is he. His name was changed to Edom. Adawam, which means red, different from Adama, which means ground. Then, when his name was changed to Edom, because he was eating that red pottage, then the people that came out of him, his descendants, became known as the Edomites. And that's what the Lord said, the people against whom the Lord has indignation forever, because they were created to be destroyed. And this is why you have, once again, these wacky-tacky Christians like Vocab Malone, the devil, that come out and they try to say that the Edomites are done away with, and most people just accept anything that comes out of the serpent's mouth without questioning it. And they figure they could erase the Edomites out of history and out of the planet by an edict. By them just saying it. You can't erase God with an edict. Inside joke. Then it says, as it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with the Most High? The Most High forbid. Why? Because the Most High does what he wants to do. This is his plan. This is his movie. He is the director and the producer up on high. He is the one that adds the actors of the movie in and writes them out. He is the one that writes who is going to play the good guy, who is going to play the bad guy. It says, for he saith to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So then it is not of him that willeth, nor of him that runneth, but of the Most High that showeth mercy. And this whole thing about the chosen line from Abraham, Isaac to Jacob, I'm getting excited over here, it's all a thing of mercy. It's a thing of mercy. And these bonehead meat puppet Israelites out here want to give their birthright and their blessing to the devil, Esau. Because you notice they never come up, what about the Chinese? What about the Japanese? What about the Africans? Or what about the Arabs, and the East Indians and these Polynesian people? How come they're not part of this? Who is their go-to? Esau, the so-called white man. Which shows you that these devils did a number on Jake. And that's what the scripture said, that when this beast, when their deadly wound was healed, it said that the one world wondered after the beast. They're not wondering after the Moabites or the Ammonites or the Ishmaelites or the Elamites or the Hamites or the Japhites. They're wondering after these Edomites, the so-called white men, the wicked. And that's why they jump up and, want him. If he can't be a part of it, then I don't want to be a part of it. But that's all right. It says, verse 16, so then it is not of him that willeth, nor of him that runneth, but of the Most High that showeth mercy. For the scripture saith unto Pharaoh, even for this same purpose have I raised thee up, that I might show my power in thee, and that my name might be declared throughout all the earth. And this whole book of Romans was written to Israelites. The whole book of Romans, the 9th chapter, is going into the whole. This is a prior chapter to Romans 11. Romans 11 goes in depth as far as the wild olive tree and the natural branches, and this is the setup which goes into the entirety, the entirety of the history of the chosen line, and how the Lord established the chosen line, and how the Lord out of the same lump, as you read on down, which is Isaac, he established the vessel of honor, which is Jacob, the righteous, and the vessel of dishonor, which is Esau, the wicked. And nobody could jump up and tell the Most High anything. Then as you read further down, it speaks about the Gentiles, which are Israelites, and within the reading of these Gentiles, it makes references back to the Old Testament of certain things that Isaiah, the prophet, said concerning the Israelites and what will befall them. Back to the book of Hosea, and certain things that were before the Israelites. And he was addressing that to these Gentiles, because those Gentiles were Israelites in a Gentile state of mind that lost their way. That's it. But then you have the devil with the serpent tongue that complicates things and puts a spin and twists and turns and contorts, everything that's written in the scriptures. But that's why Yahawah said that for all possible they would deceive the very elect. But the elect would not be deceived, because the elect would not be ignorant of Satan's devices. All right, so you can read the rest of the chapter. So we go back to Genesis the 11th chapter, after everything was established and the earth was repopulated. Then it speaks about the whole earth being of one language and of one speech, which was what? The language of the Hebrew. And it's heavy because out of that Shemitic line, you had Eber, which kept the original language, the Paleo Hebrew, the ancient Hebrew. And then one of the sons of Shem, which was Aram, which are the Syrians today, and you have a lot of Israelites among them, by the way, because that whole land was populated by Israel back then, dealing with the Syrian church of Antioch. You had the one from Turkey, the Antioch of Turkey, and you had the Antioch of Syria. So the name Aram is where you get the name of the, sister language of the Paleo Hebrew, which is Aram or Aramaean, which are those characters that we see in the most of the Torahs today. This which is the Syrian script or the Aramaean. This is what you see, written in most of these Torahs. Now, I know that HODC years ago, they did an extensive I don't know if they did the whole Old Testament or just the law, and somebody scribed it in the Paleo Hebrew. And when you go online, there's a site that has all the not all of them, but different languages where the scriptures are written in. They go to the Paleo Hebrew, they go to the Syrian script or the Aramaean, they have the English, I believe they might have Spanish, they have the Greek, and they're pretty much so you can what's that word I'm looking for? I believe it starts with a C. So you can compare, so you make a comparison between the different ones, So at this point, everyone was as one, their language one. They had one mindset, even though they were of all different nations. And they were building this tower to build it up to the skies. The scriptures don't say that. I mean, I believe it does say it. Well, it doesn't say it in this manner, but you know, the idea was to build a tower so that if another flood came, they wouldn't be destroyed with the flood. But what they didn't understand was the Most High already made a covenant with Noah, and that covenant that he made with Noah, he promised Noah that he would not destroy the earth ever again by way of water. And that covenant was sealed by the rainbow, which now is, man, you motherfuckers got to pay, man. That thing has been abominated. You know, the symbol of the rainbow, which the symbol of the rainbow is a beautiful symbol from the Lord, but they took it and they abominated it, man. Made it an abomination. But the symbol itself is not an abomination, but what's associated with it today. Because the real association is that the Lord, that's his token that he would not destroy the earth again ever by way of flood. But he didn't say nothing about fire. That's why in Peter it says that the earth and the heavens that are today are reserved unto fire. You see? So the Lord came down. The angels saw what was going on. They were building this thing, and it displeased the Most High. So what he did was he sent the angels down to confound the language so that construction of that building would stop. So nobody knew who was what, where, you know, there was different dialects being spoken, different languages. So nobody knew, you know, what was being said. And it makes sense. The scriptures don't say it that way, but it makes sense through extrapolation that the ones that could understand the dialect, they got together and they got together with others. And you know, somebody speaking over here said, "Nah, we don't know nothing about that." Nope, the 10 people over here were speaking the same language. Nope, we'll join to these people. Like, it doesn't say that in the scriptures, but it makes sense. You know, till everybody got to where they could understand each other, but the language was divided. You know, the plans were thwarted. This was the first attempt at a new world order. All right? And it didn't work then, and it's not going to work now. And this was, even prior to that, but that was the establishment of Deuteronomy, the 32nd chapter. Let's go to Deuteronomy 32. We can start at 7. I'm waiting for a phone call. You know. So if the phone call comes in, please forgive me. I gotta, you know, answer it. So just bear with me for a second. If the phone call comes through. Deuteronomy 32 and 7. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. Ask thy father, and he will show thee, thy elders, and they will tell thee. Excuse me. When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, right? We go to Genesis, the 10th chapter, Table of Nations, and it says within there, 32nd verse, these are the families of the sons of Noah after their generations in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. You know, and then Genesis 11th chapter, you know, there was another separation of language. You know, then the nations, they got their lands. You know, they started to be established. That's why you have, when you look at an ancient map, you have boundaries. You know, you have Ammon, and then you have Moab, and you have Edom. You know, and to the west of that, you have the Israelites, you know, by the different tribes and, you know, different portions of land that were allotted to each tribe. And that's why when you had sons, they would carry your line. But if you only had daughters, they couldn't carry your line. So they had to marry within their tribe so that the inheritance wouldn't go to another tribe. Then you had 3 tribes or 2.5 tribes on the other side of the Jordan, on the east side of the Jordan, which was Gad, Reuben, and half the tribe of Manasseh. They had their portion of land there. All right. Then you had the different nations that had their land. When you go further south, the land of Ham, which is so-called Africa. You know, then you had so-called Europe, which belonged to the original Japhites, which are dark-skinned people, brown-skinned people. you know. Then you had Esau, which was supposed to be in the land of Edom, but they went around the world pretty much, the wicked, and they pretty much conquered those European nations, and as they always do, planted themselves as being those people. And that's why today you see Europe full of a lot of so-called white-looking people, which are Edomites, but not all of them. Some of them are Israelites. Some of them are other nations. You're going to have Hamites that look like so-called white people. You're going to have Ishmaelites that look like so-called white people. You're going to have Elamites that look like so-called white people. You see? And that's where the angels are coming back to do the separation at the end of the world, which we're coming to now. And the separation is starting right now with the words of the Lord being spoken and gathering the elect of the nation of Israel from among these nations. Then when the angels come back, they're also going to separate all the different nations back to where they're supposed to be. You know? And everything is going to go back to how it's supposed to be from the beginning, in peace and harmony. But prior to that, the first 1,000 years is going to be them being paying for their crimes against the nation of Israel, against us. And after that, then they will be established in their land, but the Edomites will be burnt up, and that land of Edom will be given to Judah. Because land is never lost. Land is power. Land is inheritance. Lands are riches. You see? So it goes on to say, verse 8, when the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, meaning their portions of land, when he separated, not integrated, the sons of Adam. And this is the reason why you had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. There's a reason why you had the different sons of these men, you know, that became the different nations. Because the Lord didn't want everybody to be one. If that was the case, he would not stop these people that had the same language and had the same mindset and the same mind, you know, the same mind to establish the vision that they had back then. It says, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel, right? Because he gave them all their portions of lands. And it's not a mistake that Canaan, you know, got those lands where they were at, and those lands eventually were transferred over to Jacob's seed, whose name was changed to Israel, the Israelites. And that's why those lands went from Canaan, being called Canaan, to the land of Israel. It says, for the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. All right? So Jacob is a lot of the Lord's inheritance, not all nations. This is just a distortion. This what's being taught is a distortion by these heathens, led by the chief demon, Haman, vocab alone, you know, to try to insert the Edomites and the other nations into our covenant, you know, the promise that was given to us. And this is why Sarah, you know, when Hagar, you know, when they were doing what they were doing, she, you know, wanted Abraham to put her away, because she said that the son of the bondwoman is not going to be heir with the son of the promise. Which son of the bondwoman was Ishmael, his mother was Hagar, and the son of the promise that came through Sarah was Isaac, which the word Sarah, her name was Sarai, which is Sharayah, which Sharah is the feminine way of saying Shar or prince, which would be princess, and the Sharayah back then was my princess, Sharayah, my princess. But the Lord said she's not going to be called your princess. She's going to be called Sharah, just princess. You know? And then Isaac came out, his name Yatazakach, which means laughter. Because Sarah laughed when the angel told Abraham that she was going to bear him a son. And Abraham laughed too. But the angel focused more on Sarah. You know? Sharayah. Or actually Sharah, which is Sarah, or princess. All right, so then as you read down in the 11th chapter, it starts to go back into the chosen line, which is Shem. Then you had our Faxad, Then you had Salah. Then you had Eber. Then you had Peleg, or Peleg. Then you had Reu. Then you, and notice, like, they had sons and daughters, but they focus on what? The lineage of the man, because the man carries a seed. And the seed is what determines what the nation is, no matter what they look like, no matter what woman they lay with. It goes back to who the seed is. All right, then you had Serug. Then you had Nahor. Then you had Terah. Then you had the three sons of Terah, which was Abram, Nahor, and Haran. And I believe it was Haran that died. And I believe Haran was Lot's father. And then eventually down the line, in the next chapter, this is when the Most High came to Abraham and told him that he was going to be the inheritor. His seed was going to be blessed. And that's why he told him to leave from the land of his nativity, which was Ur of the Chaldees, over there in Babylon, in that area, in that region. And he told him to leave from there because he was going to show him the promised land. And from there, he showed him many great things. He showed him, the captivity of his seed, that they were going to suffer for 400 years and then be delivered out of that captivity. But he said he would do great things for them. And after that Egyptian captivity of 400 years, 30 years being in there, when Joseph was there, so the 430 years sojourning, 400 of it was in hardcore slavery underneath the Egyptians. And then from there, the Lord raised up Moses, Masha, drawn forth, and his brother Aaron, Aharon, which means manly, I believe. And through those two men, the Lord delivered the nation of Israel from the Egyptians after he hit them with the 10 plagues. Then he divided the Gulf of Suez, which is part of the Red Sea, but it's called the Gulf of Suez, which is part of the Red Sea. It splits into two on top, the Gulf of Suez to the west and the Gulf of Aqaba to the east. But our forefathers crossed through the Gulf of Suez. He drowned the Egyptians, and he actually parted the Red Sea. There was actually dry ground. The children of Israel actually walked on dry ground. The Lord actually congealed the waters. Elder Bishop Ayathan had brought that up a couple of years ago, that the Lord actually congealed the waters, meaning they were like frozen, so that they couldn't come, So it was like it was all spiritual. And then when the children of Israel crossed, the Egyptian was hard on their ass, and the Lord brought the flood or the waters back together and destroyed Pharaoh and his whole army, their chariots, horses, and everything. And from that point on, the Lord had Israel wander through the wilderness for 40 years, trying them, and then killed off their whole generation, including Moses and Aaron, and left out of the original multitude. There was only Joshua and Caleb left, which Joshua and Caleb led the children of Israel into the promised land. Beginning with Joshua, which was the head, of that whole thing. And then that's when they started conquering. You read the book of Joshua, the book of Judges. And the book of Joshua was the conquering of the different lands, regions that known as Canaan, where the children of Israel were going to inhabit by the different tribes and the different lots and the different inheritances, And then, from then on, you got the rest of the history, how you had the judges for 450 years. And during that time, there was a lot of turmoil. Jake kept going in captivity under different kings and different nations, until the Lord raised up Samuel, which when he raised up Samuel was a prophet, that was restoring Israel. And then Jake wanted a king over them like the other nations, and that's when he established King Saul over them. The Lord rejected Saul, put in King David. King David ruled over Israel. He had many wars. And then from that point on, he had many sons. But the main son that the Lord chose to inherit the throne was King Solomon, which the word Solomon, Shalamah, peaceable. And during his reign, that was the only time when we had a respite or had a rest or peace for 40 years. Then after that, King Solomon went off when he got older, and the kingdom was split and given. The southern kingdom was given to Rehoboam. The northern kingdom was given to Jeroboam. And then from that point on, there was the kings of Judah. Some of them were righteous, and some of them were wicked. But among the kings of Israel, Ephraim and all the kings were wicked, because that would be the first king. The northern kingdom would be the first kingdom to fall to the Assyrians, and they first fell to Shalmaneser the fifth. Then you had down the line you had Esarhaddon, and other kings of Assyria that put hell on us and brought us, the 10 tribes, into the land of Assyria, and we dwelt in those lands, and we didn't like the fact that we were under them, so we took counsels among each other to go to a land where never mankind dwelt, which was known in the Apocrypha as the land of Arsareth, which means another land. And we knew about those lands because King Solomon, who hired Hiram, who had the Sidonians, which were Hamites, that were expert in the sea, and also other men that were under the rule of King Solomon, that used to come over to this side of the world to get trees and exotic animals and exotic fruits and things of that nature to bring back to Solomon once every 3 years. So we knew about that, and that's where the council came into play. The 10 tribes got together. They went into the Euphrates, came down to what's called today the Indian Ocean, around through the Pacific. If I'm not mistaken, that is the Pacific, and then came under the Horn of Africa through the Atlantic to come over to this side of the world. And from that point, the so-called Americas, from Canada all the way to South America, became populated by Israelites. And the southern kingdom that stayed there, eventually their kings started becoming more and more wicked, and then the Lord, through prophecy, caused them to fall under the hands of the Babylonians. I believe that was 605 BC. The 722 to 724 BC, that's when the northern kingdom fell, and around 605 BC, if I'm not mistaken on my dates, that's when the southern kingdom fell and went in captivity under the Babylonians, or the Babylonian Empire. And there was a whole bunch of, the last king of Israel was of Judah was Zedekiah, which was the uncle of Jehoiakim. If Jehoiakim, he was the uncle of him, and he was placed in there instead of Jehoiakim. And then he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar put his eyes out, killed his sons, killed all the nobles, and destroyed the temple, and brought the children of Israel in subjection under, the Babylonian kingdom. And then the history continues on. Then after that period, you had not too long in the future from there, you had the Medo-Persian Empire, which we went up under them, beginning with Cyrus the Great, and he gave orders, because it's written in the scriptures, to rebuild the kingdom. The kingdom was rebuilt, or should I say the temple was rebuilt. And then after the rebuilding of the temple, then you had the prophets coming up, prophesying, which they were prophesying during that time too. Then we came up under the the Greek Empire, under Alexander the Greek, suffered the things that we suffered, and that history is found in the Apocrypha. And we went through a Hellenization period during the time of the Greeks, where a lot of Israelites fell, and this is where you get the terms in the New Testament. There's no difference between Jew or Greek, because the Greeks, in the New Testament, they were speaking about the Gentiles, the heathens, uncircumcision, where the Israelites had fallen away, mainly during the Greek Empire, or the Hellenization period. And from that point on, we went into captivity under the Romans, and Yahawah came on the scene. He made the great sacrifice, the great earthquake happened. The veil in the temple rent, which was the way into the Holy of Holies. He became our propitiation, our atonement. And after that, not too long in the future, after he went back in the spirit world, and the apostles were put to death, Then came 70 AD. And from that point on, we fell as a people. Jake took over the pagan Roman Empire, and eventually became the Holy Roman Empire. And then you have Byzantium, all the way up until the time when, during that 1,000 period time from the fall of Rome until the re-emergence of Rome and the Edomites under the Renaissance period. That's when Esau started getting back on top of things and started deceiving the world, all the way until you see what we see today. And then the next major event that took place after that was in the 60s with Elder Abba Bivens, who was the first man back then of those Old Testament heads that started to go into the New Testament. And from that point on, the Lord set him up to turn the hearts of the fathers back to the children, the children the hearts of the children back to the fathers, which began with the three men that he chose, which was King Masha, High Priest Arya, and High Priest Shaikwa. And from that point on, everything was spread out as you see it today, which was the vision of Ezekiel of the dry bones in the valley, receiving flesh and sinews and all that, and coming back to the proper breath of what we see today. Now we're in 2022, the year of the turn up, and all prophecies are being fulfilled. The Israelites are coming back together, and we're about to go home soon. So pretty much with that, this has just pretty much been like a little walk through history, based off of the video that Elder Yahawah did, tracing the name of Yahawah. And we have those names, Yahawah and Yahawashi. Those names are very important, So if you don't call upon those names, you will not be saved. Now, there is a point in time where you have Israelites out there that are in an ignorant state of mind, that, the Lord will bring around, but eventually they will be sealed, and they're going to be sealed by the word of the Most High. They're going to be sealed by His name, by His Son's name, and by the true and proper understanding of this word that's being taught by the Hebrew Israelites that come out of One West. The so-called Hebrew Israelism, as it's called, from One West, from the One Westers, as we're called. So with that, I pray that your brothers and your few sisters that learn something. To the next time I say Shalom.